and not many people have a movie made about them. You do. It's about your conversion from director of a Planned Parenthood facility to pro-life activist. So, what was that journey like for you?
So honestly, just the movie itself was it was something I did not want to do. So um I remember getting the email. It was kind of funny because I it just came to my regular email. Um and it was from two guys I did not know. And I had had other people email me before saying, do you ever want to turn Unplanned into a movie? And I was like, nope, no. And I didn't know him, and I just thought, okay, it's just somebody that wants to, do some little film or something. And, I just always said no. And, so then I got this email, from Chuck Konzelman and Carrie Solomon. Did not know the names, did not know who they were. And they said, the email said, have you ever thought about turning your film into a major motion picture? And I thought, I was like, nope, never, don't want to do it, not interested. And at the bottom of the email, they said, P.S., we're the guys that did God's Not Dead. And I, that to me, that was not a selling point because I had seen God's Not Dead and I thought that is a super cheesy Christian film. And I was like, I don't want my story to be that. So if I ever did do a film about my life, I do not want those kind of people doing my film. So, so I went to my husband though and I said, "Oh my gosh, you're not gonna believe this. The people that did God's Not Dead want to do my story, want to turn it into a movie." And he was like, "Oh, that's cool. Like, what did you tell him?" And I was like, "I don't know. Like, I don't know want to do it." And I think for me, it was really like I had already been so vulnerable. I had been sharing my story on stages for years. I had been, I had written it in a book and I thought that's good enough. And so I thought, I don't want my greatest sin, like the most terrible, embarrassing things I've ever done in my life. I don't want that put out on a screen. That's crazy to me. I would never want to do that. And so I was like, no. And they wrote back to me. They were very persistent. And they said, look, we think that there are people that will watch this film that would never pick up and read your book. And my husband was like, did they email you back? And I said, yes, they did. And my husband said, I've really been thinking about it. And I think there are people that will go watch this film that would never pick up your book and read it. And he said the exact same thing. And then my husband said, have you prayed about it? And I had not because I just did not want to do it. And, and I was like, no. And I knew that God wanted me to do it. I knew that was something he wanted me to do, but I just felt so uncomfortable with it. And so I just knew this is something I need to do. I was on set for about I was on set for about half of the filming. I needed to make sure that all of the films that were all of the parts that were talking about abortion, all the like kind of graphic, gritty parts. I was like, I need to make sure that those things are 100% correct. Because if they're not 100% accurate, then there's no point in us doing this film. And so I was on set for all of those. And then they got everything done. It was in its raw cut. They came to my house. They flew down to Austin. They came to my house. They showed me the film and I was like, okay, great. They left and my husband was like, you don't seem very excited. And I was like, I don't think I want this to come out. Like, I don't want to do it anymore. And my husband said, well, it's a little too late for that. And he looked at me and said, Abby, you have to remember this film is not about you. And that was really exactly what I needed to hear because, you know, I didn't do this film so that it would be about me. I didn't do it so that people would know the name Abby Johnson. Like I did it to highlight the glory of God and to show people to show people his goodness and that he is making converts every day and that it's okay to change your mind, even on something like abortion. Even if you're, you know, standing in the middle of an abortion clinic and, God drops something on you, it's okay to change your mind in that moment and that his mercy it's still available to you. And so when it came out, I thought, well, my family will see it. And so we'll have like 10 people that'll go to the theater and see it. It came out and it was so exceptionally successful. And it was a hit. And uh, it ran in theaters for 14 weeks. And every single day of that 14 weeks, I had people emailing me saying, I went to go see your movie last night. My friend drugged me there. My girlfriend drugged me there, whatever. I walked in pro-choice and I walked out pro-life.
Wow. Wow.
And to me, I just was like, okay, like, thank you, God, for really kind of forcing me to do something that was very uncomfortable. Because that was the whole purpose. And there were so many stories of, also women that wrote to me saying, I was thinking about having an abortion and my friend said, I want to take you to this movie. And I went to the movie and I walked out and said, I can never do that to my baby. And I've actually gotten to meet, now at so many years old, I've gotten to meet like unplanned babies, like babies
Wow.
that were saved
Amazing.
because of the film. And there's nothing cooler than that. So it's pretty awesome.
I think your husband asked you to pray about it.
Seriously, yeah. My husband, when people watch the movie, they're like, "Is your husband really that awesome? Like, is he really that great?" I'm like, "He really is. He really is the hero in my story." So he's amazing.
Yeah, and maybe one way of looking at it is that one way we can make up for our past mistakes, making reparation for them, is by giving testimony so that others don't make that same mistake, right?
Yeah,
It's like part of our penance in a way.
totally. And the Bible talks about that. Um, and especially about testimony that there's power in our testimonies and um that we will overcome by the blood of the lamb and the power of our testimony. And for me, this may not be for everybody, but for me and for a lot of people I know that have worked in the abortion clinics, giving my testimony is a way that it helps heal me. Um
Mm.
and it's not that way for everybody. Some people, they don't like talking, they don't like being up in front of people, they don't like all of that. But um it is really healing for me. And just exposing all of the darkness,
Mm.
even if it makes me look like a terrible, terrible person, um, just being clean of it and just getting all of it out in the open and just, because light kills the darkness. I mean, Um, light is a disinfectant. The sun is a disinfectant. And so just getting it all out and knowing there's nothing left from that time on my conscience, in my soul, like that's been
Mhm.
one of the most healing things, I think, for me. And so we encourage people, that come through our ministry, that ministry that helps clinic workers. Like, you need to tell your story. You need somebody to start telling your story to. Whether it's one of us or whether it's your best friend or somebody, you've got to start speaking it, because you have to start putting it out into the light.
Yeah, one question I have about light exposing darkness is sometimes things are so dark you don't even want to look at them. Like, I mean, abortion, human trafficking. Like, I was about to listen to a podcast on the Epstein files, and then after a few minutes, I just turned it off. Like, this is just too. I don't even know if I want to listen to this. Uh, what would you say to someone in that position?
Yeah, it is hard, actually. I remember right after I left Planned Parenthood, I was talking to someone who was pro-life, and this person's a friend of mine to this day. But I remember talking to him, and I was telling him a story. I literally don't even know what story it was, but I was telling him a story, something that had happened in the clinic when I worked there, and he said to me, like, his eyes were just looking at me like, "Oh my gosh, like, I can't believe you did that," or, "I can't," it was like horror. Like, he was looking at me just like in horror. And he said to me, "You can't ever tell that story.
Oh,
You can't ever tell that story to the pro-life movement."
my gosh.
And I was like, "Oh," like, I don't know, like, it made me feel, like, ashamed, like, um and I know that wasn't his intention. Like, his intention wasn't to make me feel like that, but anytime there's hard things like that are happening, there's a victim.
Mm-hmm.
And, I certainly was not the victim of my story. Like, I was one of the perpetrators. And, with abortion, the child in the womb is the victim. And, in sex trafficking, there's children, they're the victims. And I guess I always just think, I have hard stories to tell. And um, for a while, I thought, well, maybe I do need to kind of step back and not tell these kind of grotesque or really hard stories. And then I thought, no, like, I need to tell them, because like somebody needs to hear it. There was a victim in this story, and that victim did not have a voice. And that victim was innocent. And everybody wants to pretend like these terrible atrocities aren't happening in our society. And when we do that, the victim is not heard. And and so I'm like, no, I know it's hard. Like, these things are hard for people to hear. Um, but I mean, I just always think there was a lot of people when Unplanned came out, and they had read the book, and so they kind of knew, like, you know, ugh, there's gonna be like these abortion parts, and they were like, "Oh, I'm already pro-life. I don't need to see that." And I'm like, "But I think you do." I think there are some images that should live in our heads for the rest of our lives. Um, I think that's one of them. I think I think the abortion of an innocent child, I think that is something that should live in our heads for the rest of our lives because it's so incredibly common,
Hmm.
and there's so many. There's, there's like 3,000 victims a day. And I think if we don't live with that, if we don't rise up and give justice, if we don't rise up and do something for these babies, then no one else will, you know? And it's the same with sex trafficking. It's the same with child abuse. It's the same with these horrific things that we hear. Like, let those things sit in your mind. Like, let those things, burrow into your mind until you get to a point where you say, I've got to do something about this. Um, I think that's why people tell the story. That's why I tell the story. Not to be inflammatory, not to be a sensationalist, um, but it matters. These stories matter, and I think I live with them. I live with these images every day, and that part of that is a consequence for my actions, but also that's what keeps me fighting every day.
Yeah, because it's different when it's in our own society. It's the greatest moral evil of our time, it seems to me. And it's not enough for us just to disagree with it in principle. But I think as citizens, we have an obligation to fight it. It's not like Nazism, which, other than the Azov battalion in Ukraine, is like practically dead. This is something that we're to some degree complicit in.
Well, yeah, and you know, I think that's kind of a good example. Like, I don't think in the United States, because we were so affected, everybody in the world, but the United States in particular was so affected by the Holocaust, right? Because we saw the pictures. We have a Holocaust museum in DC that, you can walk through. You can see what was done to these people. You walk into a room and it's just piled high full of shoes of, the people that died in the Holocaust, and you see the images of these people, how they were emaciated, and you read the stories and you see the faces of the people that were tortured and researched on and all this kind of stuff, right? And I think that makes us say we would never allow that to happen in our country,
Mm-hmm.
right?
That's where you're
So
wrong.
and we're like that we would never allow uh we would never allow a larger group of people to overtake a smaller group of people and torture them and gas them to death and research on them. We would never do that, right? Because we've been taught that's terrible. We've been taught about the Holocaust since we were little grade schoolers, right? And that would be terrible. We would never do it. But that's the problem. We are doing it. We are doing it with the preborn. We are doing it with them. But the problem is that this larger group of people do not see the preborn as human beings. even though the only reason that these labs want to research on them is because they're human beings,
I never thought of it like that.
right? Like, they don't want them because they're whales. They don't want them because they're cats. They only want them because they have human DNA. And they only want them when they're well formed enough so that they have a neural tube, so that they have a liver and a thymus. You don't have that when you're 6 weeks gestation. You only have that further along into the pregnancy, right? When it's clearly a baby. But I think the reason that this happens is because you don't see, in an abortion, nobody sees the victim die. So it's all done in secret. It's all done in the secret of the womb. In this secretive, supposed to be safe place. So you don't see the baby die. You don't see the baby, fighting for its life. You see none of that. And I think that's what was so compelling with the Jewish Holocaust. Honestly, I think that's what was so compelling with the Black Lives Matter movement, because you could see these men being shot and killed. And I remember watching one. I remember watching Philando Castile. I remember watching him be shot. And even though I'm supportive of the police, and even though I did not believe in the BLM movement, I remember watching it and just watching my heart break, because you're watching a human being die. And I remember thinking, of course, of course, they're standing up against this, because they're watching someone be killed, you know? And they feel like that is a terrible injustice. And I thought, this is why people don't consider abortion an injustice, because they think the women are the victim. They don't see the actual victim, and that's the preborn child.
So now you're doing a lot to reverse that. You have a lot of different initiatives. How did you build that up? I'm kind of interested from an entrepreneurial perspective. How did you build all that up?
Well, I just saw a need. I'm really not a person that likes to, you know, duplicate something that's already happening. And there was no organization in the pro-life movement to help abortion clinic workers. And I couldn't believe it. I thought, that's crazy, because we have ministries for, I mean, everything in the pro-life movement. We've got, adoption organizations. We've got thousands of pregnancy resource centers. We've got all these, post-abortion healing ministries. We have so many different ministries. And we had nothing, though, for people like me. And I knew how difficult it was to leave the abortion clinic, because when you leave your job, you're actually not just leaving a job, you're leaving your identity behind. You're leaving. When I left Planned Parenthood, I left every single friend I had.
Jeez.
I left my church. My church kicked me out
Wow.
because I was publicly pro-life, and they were a pro-choice, pro-abortion church.
Gosh.
So I left my faith community. I left all of my friends, turned on me. And I left my identity. I had been this, you know, fierce pro-abortion feminist for all of these years. And now I did not know who I was. All I knew was that I was ashamed of who I had been, and I did not want to do that anymore. And so I was like, I don't know what that means for me. And so it kind of was like building my life back. And then I was doing all of it in public, which 0 stars, do not recommend. I was building my life back, and I was doing all this healing from working in the abortion industry in public in front of everybody. So, one day I'm leaving the clinic, and then literally 3 weeks later, I have microphones in my face, uh, asking me about my story and asking me all these questions about how I feel about this and how I feel about that. And what do I think about, abortion in cases like this? And I'm like, guys, I was just running an abortion clinic 3 weeks ago. Like, I don't know how I feel about anything. Like, and so throughout that process, I said dumb things. I got things right. I got things wrong. My journey up until this point, I've been out of the industry for over 15 years now. My journey up until this point has been messy. It's been full of, wrong things that I said and things I didn't understand. Um, and so, and the spiritual warfare when you leave the abortion industry is very real because you turned away from the enemy. And so, he is really attacking you. Like, he comes after your marriage and, particularly your marriage, and, a lot of like self-doubt and, trying to put shame back into your mind and all this kind of stuff. So the spiritual part of it is very intense. And so I realized pretty early on, because I was trying to find other people like me, because nobody really seemed to understand what I was going through in the pro-life movement. So I tried to find like other people like me and realized they didn't exist. So I thought, well, this seems like a need. So I started a nonprofit, which I did not know how to do. I knew how to run one because I'd run Planned Parenthood pretty successfully, but I did not know how to start a nonprofit. So figured that out, got it started. We um, launched officially June 6th of 2012. And yeah, in like 4 years went from $0 to like $2 million. And our growth and our expansion it was like, it just went wild because this was a completely untapped market of people that we were reaching. But it was not easy in the beginning. I'll tell you, in the beginning, the pro-life movement did not like what I was doing. A lot of people in the pro-life movement did not like what I was doing. They thought that this was a group of people that did not deserve our support. They were like, the kind of the overwhelming feeling was, well, they've made their bed, they can lie in it. That was kind of the thought process. And so it really was changing attitudes within the pro-life movement as well. And a lot of people, a lot of leaders in the pro-life movement kind of patted me on the head and said, oh, that's so cute. You want to do that. But I heard so many times, Abby, some people are just too far gone.
That's not a Christian worldview.
It is not. And that just made me want to do it even more because I'm like that. And so, I would say to people who are, trying to pursue like an entrepreneurial dream, or trying to build your own business, or, I would say let the negativity fuel you. It really was fuel to me, to kind of like prove people wrong, I guess. Um, but also I knew that I had been called to do this. I knew that I had essentially a product, right? I had a product to sell to people that no one else was selling them. And that was the ability to leave the abortion industry and come to Christ. And nobody else was selling that product to these abortion workers. The only product they were selling them was telling them that they were murderers and that they were going to hell. And so I thought, well, that sucks. That's a terrible product. Like, you've got to sell them something that's hopeful. You've got to sell them, like, if that's your product, then you've got to come out with a product to actually save them, right? And I knew that I had that product, and I knew that I was the best. I knew I was the very, very best person to reach them because I was one of them. And so I just kept at it. Um, and that first year, oh my gosh, that first year we had no money. There were days I'd go to the post office and I'd be like, oh my gosh, like I'm praying for money because we have no money. And then I'd be praying to God, like, God, please don't let an abortion clinic worker call us because we have no money in the bank right now. Like, so it was like the opposite of what I should have been praying for. But I was like, God, we can't have a worker come to us right now because we have no money to help them. And then a worker would come, and that day I would go to the post office. We'd have like a $2,000 check in there. Like, God always provided for us. And then as we started to share what we were doing, and we were sharing the testimonies, and I didn't have cute little fat babies to show them with cute little fat rolls everywhere. I had like 45 middle-aged women, like 45-year-old middle-aged women, which is not as cute as a chubby baby, right? But they were talking about all these things that they had seen. And so it wasn't about really saving their physical life. It was about helping them grow in their eternal life. And so that was something we had to remind the pro-life movement. And I think our ministry almost single-handedly did this. And that's not me like being pompous or like having hubris. Like I really do believe this. I believe our ministry almost single-handedly had to remind the pro-life movement why we are doing this in the first place. And it's not just about getting women to have babies, but it is about making heaven crowded. It is about getting people to the core of what brings about a culture of life, and that is Jesus. And we had to remind people of that. It's not just about making a tally of how many women give birth and calling that a success. That is not what the pro-life movement is. That is not what the pro-life movement should be. This is about changing people's lives. If it's just about having women give birth, then we are pro-birth, and shame on us. And that means that our relationship with women is transactional, and it's no different than Planned Parenthood. Our relationship with women should be transformational, not transactional. And the greatest way we can transform women is to bring them into relationship with their Savior.
What's so powerful about your story is you were willing to leave everything, including your relationships. And that is what I don't see most people capable of doing. I think if there were another Holocaust which happened in this country, I don't think most people would fight against it. I think most people are neither virtuous nor vicious they're just in the middle, and they'll just go with the tide of popular opinion with what's comfortable in the moment. So what is it that you have that allowed you to be so countercultural?
I don't know. I've just since I was a since I was young, like since I not like a kid, but like since I was young, I remember in high school. Um I remember the first time I ever felt like I was really in a situation where I had to do the right thing. Um on account of but it meant losing friendships. Uh, I was in high school, and our youth director, there was a group of people that did not like him, and, he was a good man, but there was a group of people that did not like him, and so, my best friend, we went on youth camp that summer, and my best friend made up a story. I think her family told her to do it, made up a story about him coming into, uh, the shower area where we were showering, and it was not true. And I knew it wasn't true because I had been with her the entire time. And, and it had, spread enough where the church was voting on on kicking him out of the church and him losing his job, and not just losing his job, but I mean, this was scandalous, like for his reputation. And I remember when it happened, I remember going to my parents and just saying, Mom, Dad, like, I know this didn't happen. I know this is a lie. And I confronted my friend about it and, had told her, "You're not telling the truth." And she basically was just kinda like, "I'm just doing what my mom is telling me to do." And I was, maybe a sophomore, junior. I think I was a sophomore maybe in high school. And I told my parents were like, "Well, you need to go to that business meeting we're having, and you need to stand up and tell the truth." And so I did, and I got up there and I told the truth and directly contradicted what my best friend had said. Um, and she was sitting right there. And then she got up and admitted that her mom had just told her to say that. And, this lovely man of God was vindicated. And I remember that was the first time I'd ever felt like justice had won out. And I remember that feeling like I wanna feel that again. You know? Like, I just remember being like, "Wow, that I wanna keep doing that." Um, and I think it's that feeling. I think Planned Parenthood saw that in me, and I think they perverted that to convince me that I was going to fight for justice for women. Um, because there's this evil group of people wanting to take away their rights. And so it becomes very perverted, and it becomes, you're fighting for women's rights and you're fighting for justice. And so it kind of gives you that same high. And, but it's wrong, because you have to completely detach yourself from the child who's really the victim. You don't think about them at all. It's only about the women. It's never about the tragedy of what's actually occurring for the woman to have that right to murder. And and so I think it's something that, like, God's just always kind of given me that courage to do it. I think it's just kind of like a personality thing, but I also think my parents always encouraged that. My parents were always like, "You do the right thing no matter the cost." And they always encouraged me to use my mouth and to say what I believe. Um, on my report cards, I always had excessive talking marked, on my report cards. So, um, my parents knew that my mouth was gonna be one way that I became successful one day. Um, but they never stifled that. They always just encouraged it. And my parents always wanted to help me find, um, facts and to do the research. And, I do have to say, like, even when I was on the wrong side of the abortion debate, my parents were always, uh I know it was really hard for my parents during that time because my parents were very pro-life, but my parents were always proud of me. Even though they hated what I was doing, they saw their daughter climbing up the ladder of this, multi-billion dollar organization, and they had taught me this intense work ethic, right? Whatever you're doing, you work hard at it. And so they saw me working very hard at my job. And so on one hand, they were disgusted with what I was doing, but on the other hand, they were very proud that I was working so hard and I was doing the work. I was, you know, working hard like they had taught me to do. And so they never caused like a rift in our relationship. I knew where they stood. They made that very clear that they did not agree with what I was doing. But, um, when I would get awards or something like that, my parents would say, they would always say things like, "We're really proud of how hard you work."
Mm.
And I think that's important. I think that's an important takeaway for parents because there's a lot of parents out there who, their kids have gone wild or they're living a lifestyle that maybe the parents don't understand. And, my word to them is please don't ever let choices your kids make that are honestly, they could be fleeting choices. They could be temporary choices. Don't ever let the choices that your children make cause a permanent separation in your relationship with your children, no matter what they are, I mean, I worked at Planned Parenthood for 8 years, and I know my parents were like, "Oh my gosh, she's never gonna leave." I know there were times that they felt, um, hopeless, but they prayed every day, and they never gave up. And so then when I did leave, I knew that my parents were still there because they had always been there. And it's the same, like, even if your kids are, you know, dealing with homosexuality or whatever, and you say, "No, no, it's that's who they are now. It's become who they are." Like, you don't know that. You don't know what kind of conversion your kids can have. Um, and so I would just encourage people to keep that relationship open. Always keep that relationship open. Um, don't ever separate yourself from your children. The bond there is too important.
They sound like incredible people and great,
They are.
great parents. And you're an incredible person, Abby. Talking with you, kind of have one of these strange experiences where I feel like kind of stepping outside of time. In that, I feel like we've already won the battle, just because we found our Lord. So, and we're doing our best each day, and that's it. That's all we need to do.
Yeah,
So
that's all
we've
we have to
already
do.
won.
Like the victory is there, you know? Like we have the victory. We just have to work every day and save as many lives as we can until he returns. And that's the call. And honestly, it's not that hard. I mean, people act like
It really isn't. I mean, life is short.
it's really not. Like, it's not
I mean, what
hard.
do we have to lose, anyways?
Like,
So.
people are like, "Ugh." Like, they act like life is so hard. And I'm like, "But is it?" Like, you really I mean, like, yeah, we have jobs we have to do, to pay our bills and stuff. But most of the time, like, finances are hard because we're living too lavishly. So, live within your means. Get rid of the things you don't need. That will make your life a lot simpler. That's what we've learned in our family. Um,
It's hard when we're fighting our own conscience.
yeah, but like, and then talk about Jesus as much as you can. I mean, that's really why we're here, is just to bring people to God. So, and that's like an easy task, really. Just be in relationship with people and treat them like Jesus would treat them. If they yell at you, don't yell back. If they yell at you, offer them hope. Ask questions. How did Jesus answer questions? With questions. I mean, just be that drink of water to them that they obviously so desperately need. And it's really not hard. I mean, everybody acts like the world is just like crumbling around, crumbling down around us and all of this. And I'm like, you know what, guys? I sit on my front porch and I watch my 8 kids playing, with each other in the front lawn. And I just think, wow, like, I'm just really blessed. And it's so much about mindset, you know, just being thankful for what we have and seeing the blessings that are in front of us and living in that blessing and appreciating what God has given us, you know? So, yeah.
Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to end by highlighting one testimony you gave without realizing it, perhaps, which is about a third through the conversation. Your son walked in, I guess, from school,
Yeah.
took a sip of your Coke, and then stared at the camera for a while, then walked away for those listening rather than watching. And it didn't faze you at all. And you showed him physical affection without breaking stride. And I
Yeah.
think that's such a powerful witness for moms that, hey, you can have 8 kids, and that's not, I mean, that's not that difficult either. I don't want to, I mean, I'm not in that
No,
position. I
it's
don't want
not. Like, people are like, "Hey, kids, how do you do it?" And I'm like, "I don't know, we just do it." Like, it's not like I had 8 kids at one time. Like, they just come into your
to.
life. I did have twins. So
Okay.
we did have 2 come in at one time. But one of our kids is adopted. That was completely unplanned. We never planned on adopting a child when one of our children was 6 months old. But a baby needed a home, and we said yes. And that's kind of my husband and I's philosophy, I guess, in our marriage, in our life, is that if Jesus gives the opportunity, we say yes. Just hands down. Like, if we feel like, okay, God has ordained this, it's a yes. Every time it's a yes. It's a yes. And it's fun. It's a fun way to live, actually. It's kind of like, I don't know if you ever saw that movie, like Yes Day. And it was
Oh,
like,
yeah, was it the
yeah,
Jim Carrey one?
yeah,
Yes,
Jim
ma'am,
Carrey,
something
like
like
he
that.
has to
Yeah,
say
I
yes,
didn't see it, but I know the gist of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kinda how we are. We're like, we pray about it. If we feel good about it, we're like, "Yeah," you know? And, um, it has served us well, and it makes life fun and interesting for the kids, and, we generally say yes to them too. I mean, if they're like even just in, like, little things, you know? Like, we're kinda sitting around one Saturday, and they're like, "Hey, can we go on a hike?" We're like, "Yeah."
Yeah, if it's not a sin, let's do it. I
Go
mean,
on a hike.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
things we're gonna say no to our kids to, so let's say yes to things that are good.
I mean, they're like, hey, can we like go roller skating? We're like, yes. Like we should, I mean, whatever it is.
I
I
love
mean,
that.
we're like, yeah, we'll do it. And I think, keeping video games out of your house,
Yes.
keeping your kids active and being active with them is a really, really important part of life. I'm terrible at basketball, but if my kids are like, Mom, will you come shoot hoops with us? I'm like, yes, I will. And I'll miss every single shot. But I will go do it because when my kids ask me to do something, I always want them to be able to say, my mom always did it. If she asked, she did it. And I think that's an important part of being a parent and being in relationship with your children. And my children are part of my work, you know. I mean, if we go out to an abortion clinic to pray, they go with me. I don't hide the reality of abortion. We live in Austin, Texas, which is like super liberal,
Mm-hmm.
super like gay positive, you know. So my kids wanted to go to um this lake to swim one day, and we were like, yeah, let's go, let's swim. And there were like two, gay guys being super affectionate to each other, inappropriately affectionate. Like it would be uncomfortable. There was a guy and a girl too. Like it was just gross. And my kids were like, like what is going on, And I just was like, well, I was like, sometimes people have sinful relationships, and that's not normal. It's outside of natural law. It's outside of the order that God has given us for marriage, for a man and a woman to be together. And they were just like, cool. Like, I mean, so we don't hide it from them. We don't, we're not like, oh my God, don't look at that. Don't, we're just kind of like, let's just explain this. Sin abounds in our society. Let's make our kids prepared to see it, to encounter it, and to have a biblical justification for their worldview,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so that's what we do. And our kids aren't perfect, and we're certainly not perfect parents. We've made a lot of mistakes, but we are a very, very fun family. And uh and I would say, people ask me if having 8 kids is hard, and I tell them all the time, no. It's actually been easier the more kids we've had.
Yes. Well, it's like raising the first generation of Christians in the Roman Empire. That's, hey, look, we're not gonna. This is the empire. I mean, we can't protect them from everything, but what we can do is open up to the grace of the Holy Spirit. Well, thank you, Abby. It's really been a privilege to talk to you. I really appreciate it, and I hope your message goes out to all the world.
Thank you.